Working with wild animals is often portrayed as a dream job, feeding lions, caring for tigers, walking among creatures most people only see behind glass. But behind the scenes lies a world of unpredictable danger, where one wrong move, one unexpected instinct, or one tiny mistake can become fatal in seconds. These are not just tragic accidents. They are some of the most brutal, shocking, and devastating zookeeper deaths ever recorded that reveal just how thin the line is between passion and peril when humans step into the domain of nature's most powerful predators. Stacy Conweiser was known around the Palm Beach Zoo as the Tiger Whisperer. For more than 3 years, she worked closely with the zoo's 4 Malayan tigers, an endangered species so rare that fewer than 300 exist in the wild. But on April 15, 2016, during what should have been a normal afternoon, something went terribly wrong inside the Tiger Night House, the private area where the big cats eat and sleep, tucked far away from the visiting crowds. Stacy entered the enclosure to prepare for a 2 p.m. Tiger talk, the kind of presentation she had done countless times. It was quiet, familiar, and routine. But this time, Hottie, a 12-year-old, 350-pound male tiger, wasn't where he was supposed to be. Investigators later discovered a chilling detail. The door to Hattie's cage, which should have been locked, was open, and Stacy's view of him may have been blocked by a large box inside the enclosure. She never saw him coming. A scream burst across the zoo's radio system, desperate, panicked, and cut short. Stacy had only seconds to react, and her co-workers could only listen as the attack unfolded out of sight. By the time they sprinted toward the night house, Hattie was already standing over her. The attack was swift, brutal, and silent in the way only a top predator can be. Zoo staff faced an impossible choice. Hattie was an endangered species, and firing a bullet risked hitting Stacy or enraging the tiger further if the shot wasn't instantly fatal. So they tried to lure him away, calling him, coaxing him, begging him to step back from her body. Nothing worked. Only after a tranquilizer dart finally entered his flank were paramedics able to reach Stacy. 17 long minutes had passed. She was rushed to St. Mary's Medical Center, but the injuries were catastrophic. Her spine fractured, her jugular torn, her neck crushed. She died shortly after arrival. Outside the night house, guests had no idea what was happening. They were quietly escorted out of the zoo as investigators arrived. OSHA, Florida Fish and Wildlife, and police trying to piece together how an experienced, disciplined keeper ended up face-to-face with a tiger in an unsecured space. There were no operating cameras inside the night house. The ones installed were only turned on during breeding attempts. The attack played out in a blind spot, unwitnessed by anyone. In the hours after the tragedy, the zoo, the staff, and the world learned more about Stacy, the devoted keeper who risked her life every day to protect a species on the brink of disappearing. Her husband, Jeremy, also a keeper, wrote a private tribute read to staff in an emotional meeting. Officials spoke about her passion, her discipline, her understanding of the risks. She had even recently been offered a chance to leave the zoo for a job with the FDA, a safer life, a different path, but she hadn't made a decision yet. Some blamed protocol, some blamed human error. Others argued that no matter how many precautions are taken, working with apex predators always carries a chance of tragedy. The Animal Legal Defense Fund issued a blistering statement, calling this a preventable incident and demanding maximum penalties, insisting that as long as humans work inches away from tigers and elephants, these kinds of deaths will continue. But for those who knew Stacy, the story was simpler and far more heartbreaking. She loved these animals so deeply that she accepted the danger every single day. And on that April afternoon, in a quiet room behind the scenes, that danger became reality. Rosa King arrived at Hamerton Zoo Park that morning the same way she always did, with quiet focus, a sense of purpose, and the kind of calm confidence only a seasoned carnivore keeper possesses. She loved the big cats, especially the Malayan tiger named Zookeeper. To visitors, Rosa was the smiling face behind the glass. To her colleagues, she was the dependable, safety-minded keeper who never cut corners. And on May 29, 2017, just before the zoo was set to open at 10 a.m., she walked into the tiger paddock to do something she had done hundreds of times: clean the viewing windows. It should have been ordinary, safe, routine. But somewhere in the process, a single detail, a metal isolation slide meant to guarantee separation between human and tiger, was left open. A mistake so small, so simple, yet so catastrophic that no one noticed it until it was too late. Working alone, likely tired from long hours and late-night serval kitten feedings, Rosa stepped inside the enclosure, unaware that Sissip had unobstructed access to the same space. The tiger was quiet, hidden, watching. There were no witnesses, no cameras running, no colleague to double-check the locks. What happened inside that enclosure took place in absolute silence. Sometime between 10 and 11 a.m., a zoo visitor looked through the public viewing window expecting to see a tiger, and instead saw Rosa, motionless on the ground. The alarm went up instantly. Staff rushed to the paddock and found a scene that told the story in chilling fragments. A large pool of blood, Rosa's keys scattered beside a blood-stained paw print, a wet cloth, a squeegee, an upturned bucket. Tools of a peaceful morning chore interrupted by a sudden violent attack. Police and investigators combed through the space, checking every slide, every gate, every mechanism that should have prevented this from happening. There was no mechanical failure, no malfunction. The gates were simply open. 3 of them. The metal vertical slide separating Sissip from the keeper area, the protective keeper gate, even a wooden gate that blocked public access to the service path. All open, all accessible. Colleagues believed Rosa may have been trying to leave the paddock when Sissip struck, possibly after stalking her silently for several minutes. The injuries she suffered were devastating: lacerations to her arms and neck and a severed spinal cord. She died before anyone reached her. During the inquest, experts described a psychological phenomenon familiar to anyone who performs the same task day after day. Sometimes you look at a lock, a gate, a slide, and your brain sees what it expects to see, not what's actually there. Even experienced keepers can fall prey to the mind's shortcuts, and Rosa, exhausted and working a demanding 45-hour week, may have simply missed the one detail that separated safety from deadly risk. Her colleagues defended her fiercely. She was careful, methodical, the last person anyone expected to overlook a safety step, but the system at the zoo relied entirely on the human performing it. No secondary check, no redundant safeguard, just trust. Trust in training, trust in memory. Trust that nothing would ever slip. The jury ruled Rosa's death an accident, a devastating, tragic intersection of human error and animal instinct. It was a warm Saturday afternoon at Zurich Zoo, a day when families wandered the pathways expecting nothing more intense than the sight of a yawning tiger or a lazy, sunbathing lion. No one imagined they would become witnesses to one of the most harrowing moments the zoo had ever seen. At around 1:20 p.m., inside the Siberian tiger enclosure, a 55-year-old veteran keeper went about her duties, routine tasks she had performed countless times over her long career. She was experienced, respected, trusted. But on this afternoon, one detail, one barrier not fully secured, set the stage for tragedy. Somewhere inside the enclosure, a young Siberian tigress named Irina, powerful and curious, had access she shouldn't have had. And while the keeper focused on her work, Irina closed the distance silently. Visitors standing on the other side of the glass watched in confusion at first, then horror, as the tigress lunged. Their screams cut through the air. Someone hit the alarm. What happened next unfolded in frantic seconds. Keepers sprinted toward the enclosure, knowing exactly what kind of danger they were running into. Shouting, banging, doing anything they could to draw Irina's attention away from their fallen colleague, they managed to lure the tiger into a holding pen, but the damage was already done. First responders rushed in, administering CPR with trembling urgency, fighting for a life already slipping away. Despite everything, every effort, every second, they couldn't bring her back. She died on the cold ground of the enclosure she had dedicated years to caring for. Zoo officials, police, and investigators arrived quickly, but there was only one question anyone could ask. Why was she inside the enclosure at the same time as a fully grown Siberian tiger? There was no sign of malice, no sabotage, The prosecutors would later describe it as something painfully human, a moment of inattention, a mistake that cost a life in the most unforgiving environment imaginable. Irina, the tigress, was not harmed. She had simply acted on instinct, the instinct any wild animal carries no matter how many years it has lived behind walls. The zoo director offered condolences through shaken words, describing the keeper as a long-standing, valued member of their team. Staff and visitors who had seen the attack were offered psychological counseling. Some had watched the entire thing play out just a few feet away, separated only by glass. Hours earlier, the zoo had reopened after a long COVID shutdown, hoping to bring families a sense of normalcy. By evening, it was closed again, silent, grieving, haunted by the echo of visitors' screams and the alarm bell that signaled the moment everything went wrong. The truth that lingered in everyone's minds afterward was stark and chilling. In the world of big cats, even one forgotten latch, one unsecured barrier, one human moment of trust in routine can become fatal. The keeper was experienced. She knew the risks. Yet, on that afternoon, surrounded by the animals she dedicated her life to, she had no chance to fight back or escape. The enclosure returned to stillness, but for those who witnessed it, the memory of Irina's sudden movement and the desperate attempts to save a life will never fade. It was a reminder that even in the safest, most controlled zoos, the raw power of nature can erupt without warning, and when it does, it is brutal, swift, and irreversible. It started as a routine maintenance job, an ordinary winter morning at Seaview Predator Park. David Solomon, 52 years old and a familiar face to every tiger on the property, walked the service corridor with the calm confidence of someone who had spent 15 years in the presence of animals most people only see through glass. He knew their habits, their moods, their quirks. He had raised some of them from cubs. Jasper was one of them, a massive, unpredictable Siberian tiger David had known since the animal's earliest days. But routine is a dangerous illusion, especially when you're working beside a predator powerful enough to kill you in seconds. The electric fence separating Jasper from the maintenance area had been switched off so repairs could be made. For David, this wasn't unusual. He had done this work many times. What he didn't know, what he couldn't know, was that Jasper had been watching, silent, calculating, pressing his weight against the fence that normally snapped with electric warning, but today lay quiet and powerless. In a heartbeat, Jasper scaled the 12-foot barrier as effortlessly as if it were nothing more than a fallen tree. Staff members nearby froze. David turned, and there was no mistaking what he saw. A 675-pound tiger charging full speed down the corridor toward him. He ran. He lunged for the next fence, desperately trying to climb to safety, fingers curling around the metal mesh, but Jasper reached him too quickly. The tiger's claws hooked into David's clothing and skin, dragging him down before he could pull himself over. Witnesses later said the sound of the impact, David hitting the ground under hundreds of pounds of muscle, was something they would never forget. The tiger bit, shook, and overpowered him in seconds. Evidence suggests Jasper snapped his neck in the struggle, ending David's life almost instantly. But the nightmare didn't stop there. Fueled by instinct and adrenaline, Jasper scaled yet another fence, this one also without power, and entered the neighboring enclosure where a rival male, Judah, lived. Staff watched in horror as the two enormous tigers clashed in a violent, fatal fight that left Judah dead within moments. By then, the situation had spiraled into something almost surreal, a chain reaction caused by one small detail, a fence that wasn't energized. As Jasper approached Judah's sister Amber, displaying dominant mating behavior, park officials called in veterinarians and wildlife authorities. With no other options, they darted both tigers, tranquilizing them so David's body could be recovered along with Judah's remains. It took all available hands, all available courage to enter that corridor again. Those who knew David spoke through tears. They described him as loyal, gentle, deeply bonded to the animals he cared for. Someone who had helped raise Jasper from a cub, who had moved him to different enclosures, who had spent years understanding a creature that, in the end, turned on him simply because instinct overpowered history. The park released a statement filled with grief, confirming not just the tragedy but the way it unfolded. A fence under repair, a tiger seizing an opportunity, a keeper caught in the wrong place, at the worst possible moment. What killed David wasn't negligence or cruelty. It was the brutal, unforgiving reality of working with apex predators, where even one moment without electricity, one step in the wrong corridor, can become fatal. For the staff who witnessed it, the memory will never leave them. David, reaching for the fence, Jasper's silent leap, the frantic attempts to save him that came too late. It was a reminder that in predator parks and zoos, even with experience, love, and years of familiarity, wild animals are wild animals, and sometimes nature doesn't offer mercy. It started with rain, days of it, sheets of water hammering the hills around Sinkawang, softening the earth until it finally gave way. In the middle of the night, a landslide tore through Sinka Zoo, snapping wood, bending metal, and slicing open the enclosure that held 2 young Sumatran tigers, barely 18 months old, but already powerful enough to command fear. By morning, the zoo was silent. Too silent. A 47-year-old zookeeper, a man who had walked those same paths for years, was found lying near the damaged pen. His body bore the unmistakable wounds of claws and teeth, bite marks, deep scratches, the kind only a terrified animal trying to survive would leave. Authorities realized immediately the tigers were out, and the clock was already ticking. Panic rippled across Sinkawang. Tourists were ordered to evacuate nearby attractions. Residents locked their doors. Police launched a massive hunt through dense forest, armed with drones, tranquilizer rifles, and the desperate hope that both tigers could be saved. Dead animals, a monkey, an ostrich, were found near the enclosure, chilling reminders of how quickly chaos had erupted in the dark. One of the tigers appeared first, slipping silently through the undergrowth. Officials aimed, fired, and by grace or luck, the tranquilizer dart hit. The young cat collapsed, breathing but alive. For a moment, it felt like the nightmare might be contained. But the second tiger, that was different. This one wasn't running, it was fighting. Officers tried again and again to sedate it, but the darts barely slowed it down. The cat prowled, growled, lunged, its instincts sharpened by fear and confusion. Every minute it stayed loose increased the danger to the entire town, and when it charged toward the edge of the forest, toward the nearest neighborhood, officials made an agonizing decision. They shot it, not because they wanted to, but because they had no other choice left. Our priority is human safety, one official said, the weight of the moment heavy in his voice. Even then, no one felt victorious. It was tragedy all around. A zookeeper dead, a critically endangered tiger lost, and a community shaken by a disaster that began with nothing more than rain. In the end, one tiger was sedated and brought back to the zoo under tight watch, its life spared, but the damage could not be undone. With fewer than 400 Sumatran tigers left in the wild, every loss feels like a step closer to an irreversible future, and for the people of Sinkawang, that night will forever be remembered as the moment nature broke through the walls and left heartbreak in its wake.